Hey guys, welcome back. Today is Tuesday, which means it is time for How To Tuesday. But before we get started, a special thank you, shout out to Eugene Sherman over at the University of Washington. Eugene, that feedback, it was awesome. Thanks for that. Really do appreciate it. All right, let's get started. So How To Tuesday. Today we're going to focus on central device encryption, aka full disk encryption for Bitlocker and FileVault 2 machines. Now, Brandon's got some good tips and some good tricks in this one. It's a little bit longer than the How To Tuesday video that we would like to do, but there's a lot of good stuff in here, so I would suggest that you watch all the way to the end because I think you're going to find some things that you might not be aware of. All right, over to Brandon.
All right, guys. So as Jason just mentioned, we're going to cover the Sophos Central Device Encryption. Now, device encryption through Sophos Central is set up to manage any BitLocker or FileVault 2 capable machines. So typically that's Win 7 Enterprise or above, or any of the latest Mac OS. So first and foremost, if we drop down into the encryption section, go into policies, this is typically what I tell my clients to do first. There is a base policy, such as with every other feature in Central. Within the base policy, in this case, I typically recommend that you turn it off. The reason for this is if you accidentally push the encryption feature to an endpoint that you did not wish to be encrypted, you want an extra failsafe in place just to make sure that it's not going to also receive policy by default. So typically I tell all of my clients to go ahead and turn this policy off and then create an encrypted devices policy. Now, this encrypted devices policy, of course, gives you the ability to now assign these machines. If we go into the settings section, we can see what settings we have for device encryption. Now, of course, you can see that this policy is on. You do have the ability to encrypt the boot volume only. You have the ability to set up startup authentication or pre-boot authentication, and you have the ability to choose to encrypt use space only. Now, with the require startup authentication, there's a few different methods. So there's the TPM only. So if I were to turn this policy off, that turns it into a TPM only for pre-boot authentication. Now, if your system does not have an active installed TPM module, it will fail to start the encryption process entirely. It just will not encrypt. So you'll have to actually turn this on. Encryption always needs some form of pre-boot authentication in order to kick off. You need to know that either there's an authorized user there, or there's been no tamper to the system, that, the hard drive hasn't been removed and slaved to another machine, or a whole number of things, right? Now, back on the startup authentication, so again, you have TPM only by turning this policy off. If you turn this policy on, there's two methods. So there's the PIN plus TPM. If it does not have a TPM module on it or installed and active, it will request a passphrase be created. So if you see that, those two different ones, if you've got this feature turned on, and you see PIN, that means there's a TPM module there. If you see passphrase in the endpoint menu, that means there was no TPM module, so it selected passphrase. That's a good way just to show that indication, right? Now, there's a couple ways to actually install this feature. So if we go back to the global menu into devices, you can see all these plus symbols in the encryption menu. All I really have to do is just go ahead and hit the plus symbols. Now, if you want to do this in bulk, by all means, you can come into this Manage Endpoint Software, go to the Device Encryption section, select all the devices that you want in bulk, hit the right arrow and save, and it'll install that feature for you. Don't forget, though, that you will need to come back into the encryption menu, go into Policies, and assign those new computers to your encrypted devices policy. Next, we have, if we go back to the dashboard, you can see we have a few options here. So there's the setup device encryption, which is basically going through the policy like we just saw. Create the new encryption policy, what computers are encrypted, could be encrypted, all computers, which you're seeing right here as well. These are selectable, so I can drop down and see the only computer that I have currently encrypted. The next thing that you'll see is get recovery key. So there's a few options for this. So if we choose get recovery key, you can enter the 5-digit identifier that you'll be provided on the failed system or locked system and just generate a recovery key right here. Not a problem. Subsequently, if you wanted to or knew the machine name itself, you could go into the actual machine account, in the device encryption section, hit retrieve recovery key. There's the ID, there's the recovery key. All just there for you. So one thing to note with this is that now that I've selected this, once the endpoint checks in again, it's actually going to change this recovery key. So it's a revolving key. It's a one-time use kind of deal. There's not a single password that goes across. It's, significantly more secure than older versions. Next, you can tell within the device encryption section that boot volume C has been selected. There's the volume, the encryption status. So this will say failed, encrypting, encrypted. And then the authentication type. So this goes back to that pre-boot authentication, where in this case, it's a VM. So there's not an installed or active TPM module. Hence, it required me to set a passphrase. Otherwise, you would see PIN or no authentication, which means TPM only. As far as the endpoint agent itself, it's going to change a little bit. So you're used to seeing this only on your endpoint agent. It'll divide into two, and you'll be able to see whether the data protection or device encryption has been turned on or it's available but off. And then you'll be able to go in the About section and see what version has been installed.
So there you have it. It's pretty straightforward when we're talking about central device encryption in Sophos Central. There's a few little tips and tricks to be aware of, and that's what we wanted to show you guys today. But by and large, this is actually a very easy deployment. In fact, I would argue it's actually one of the easiest deployments that you can possibly do of any Sophos product. So hopefully you guys found that informative. We really do appreciate your feedback, so we'd love to hear it. Eugene gave us some great stuff last week. Thanks again, Eugene. It was awesome. And with that, as always, guys, really do appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos. We're going to keep doing them. We're having some fun. And with that, we will see you guys again on our next How To Tuesday.